Representative Christensen, it seems like the Republicans and the Democrats have two separate ways of approaching the McCleary decision for funding education. Can you talk about those ways?
Well, let me talk about something that's just happened in the last couple days. As we've just opened session here just in the last couple weeks, there's been some astonishing pieces of legislation that we've been voting on. One of them is titled the Levy Cliff Bill. And the Levy Cliff Bill essentially, I liken that bill to, I'm a Seahawks fan, aren't most of us anyway. You show up at the game, and the opposing team just kicked off to the Seahawks, and you're all excited, you're ready for them to get out there and mix it up and try and make a touchdown. And what is the first play that they do? They punt the ball. They punt the ball right back to the opposition, and that's what the Levy Cliff Bill was. The Levy Cliff Bill that was passed out on an almost partisan vote here just a few days ago was one where the Democrats said, we're giving up. What we're going to do is we're going to put in a temporary fix for 1 year, and we're not going to address what the real problem is here on our levy situation. What we're looking at is solving the levy problem, solving the funding problem. If we ultimately, as part of our fix, have to look at the Levy Cliff Bill as something down the road that's necessary to our master plan to fix this, great, we'll look at that. Fact of the matter is, we've actually done that in the last few years. It's been done a couple times. And so we're not opposed to doing it when it's necessary, but we're still looking at weeks from now before that should even be considered. We want to get on the grass, start running plays, start moving forward to a solution so that touchdown we make is going to be solving our education funding problem. And that's what our goal is, to solve the problem.
While the Democrats have been looking at a temporary fix, the Republicans took action this week for more of a permanent fix. Can you talk about that?
Since 2006, House Republicans have been running a bill that's titled Fund Education First. What it is under the state constitution, we are supposed to provide amply for education. It's one of the very few things, frankly, that we do as a legislature that is actually called out in our state constitution as something we are supposed to be doing under the Constitution. And we grapple with this, we debate this issue, and so we, back in 2006, ran the very first Fund Education First bill in the history of the state. Why? It was to solve that problem. It was to make education the focal point of the decisions we're making on how we spend money in Washington state and define what is basic education. It had never been defined. People want us to fund it, but believe it or not, it wasn't in statute. So what are you funding? And so we worked to solve that problem over the course of the next several years. The problem was that particular bill didn't get a hearing until McCleary. It took the Supreme Court McCleary decision of 2012, so that bill sat for 6 years before it actually got a hearing. Had that bill not only had a hearing, but had been voted on, it would have done much, if not everything, necessary to solve the problem we're dealing with in McCleary today. And so what we did actually just here in the last day or so is we ran an amendment to the House rules, and it was to prioritize how we set our policies, how we spend our money in Washington state, and that was to make funding of education a first priority in the decisions that we make. It says we're supposed to do it in the Constitution. Why are we not doing it here in the legislature? That vote was voted down, 50 no votes, all Democrats, 48 yes votes, all Republicans, and they threw it out.
We're looking at probably more than a $40 billion budget. With the Fund Education First plan, how does that work with the governor asking for almost $6 billion, maybe even more? Some have said even $8 billion that is needed to fund education.
The tax proposals that everybody in the Democrat Party and the governor's office continue talking about are only to raise taxes to pay for education. The Fund Education First program is that we have way more than enough money to fund education and almost everything else. What we're saying is don't hold our kids hostage when it comes to tax increases. Let's make our education system, which it says in the Constitution we're supposed to be doing first anyway, let's make it the priority, let's make it the first thing that we fund, let's fund it properly, and then let's look at everything else the citizens want and some of the legislators want government to do. And if indeed we can't within those existing resources fund those things after funding education, then let's talk about tax increases to deal with those specific issues. I kind of liken it to this. Why is it that we see every once in a while on our ballots that you better vote for this tax increase or we're going to cancel your 911 service? There's a lot of other things you could probably cancel out before you actually take out your 911 service. Maybe you plant different plants in the parks. Maybe there's other things you could cut from the budget, but these are basic needs and services. Public safety is just like education is. Let's get our priorities straight, and that's all Fund Education is supposed to be about, is let's get our priorities straight, and if these other things can justify the need for a tax increase on their own, rather than hanging that tax increase over the heads of our kids, then let them speak for themselves. Let them prove themselves necessary to need to raise taxes to fund all the other stuff we want government to do.
Viewers sitting in their chair watching this on TV right now, what do you tell them as far as getting involved, or should they?
Absolutely get involved. My title is a state representative, but I'm not an expert in every issue that's going on in my district or around the state. I'm a real regular guy with an odd job, being a legislator. I may be an expert in the field that I'm professionally trained in, but for me to serve you best, back home, I need to know what's going on back home. What are those challenges you're dealing with? What are those state agency challenges, local government challenges? What is it that you just feel like you need an advocate on your behalf to vent to so that we can take a look at and see if there's any way at the state level if we can help you in that? So for me to do my job well, I need you not to be silent. We have a saying in Olympian, it's called silence is agreement. Now I know you don't all agree with everything that's going on out there, so please share those ideas, those concerns with me. All the contact information on how to get a hold of me via phone or email is on your screen, and please don't hesitate. I want to serve you guys to the best of my ability, but I need to know what's going on back home.